Looks like Modern is back on the menu because they reprinted Fetchlands. Kind of. They did. You know, I'll be honest with you, I give it a C. I mean, it's not the Fetchland reprint in $4 boosters that we wanted. It's like instead of them handing us those Fetchland reprints like we would have desired, they just kind of went, Don't worry, those weren't real Fetchlands. It's like, all right, it's not great, but prices are going to come down. They already are a little bit, and between now and Modern Horizons 2, I'm willing to bet that the secondary market is going to have some good deals. So go shop at your local game store instead of buying and cracking collector's booster packs. Thank you, Wizards of the Coast. To heck with Pioneer. Let's talk Modern. Presented here are the top 5 cards likely to see Modern play from Zendikar Rising. All joking aside, I do strongly believe that this flaccid Fetchland reprinting we ended up with will still help access to Modern, and I remain optimistic that Wizards of the Coast does finally get it and will continue with reasonable Fetchland reprints in the future. I know. 7 years in and I'm still optimistic that Wizards of the Coast will do the right thing? I have love in my heart, okay? I've got a lot of love, and it's in there, and it's overflowing, and it splashes up on Wizards of the Coast. I don't know. I love Modern. I'm excited about Modern. Let's talk Modern. Before I get to my top 5 picks, I have an honorable mention. This is a card that makes me smile. It makes me want to play a admittedly suboptimal deck in the hope that maybe it can be tweaked and crafted just right to finally win, despite the fact it probably won't. No, it's not Merfolk. Stop asking that. It's Modern Mill, and we are going to bring ruin to our opponents, or attempt to, with a Ruin Crab. Modern Mill, I will live long enough to see it as a top-tier deck. We're close, I tells ya, close. And with Ruin Crab, we are now even closer. It's a single blue for Crab with Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 3 cards. So this is a fixed Hedron Crab, and it is just what Modern Mill needed. Hedron Crab targeted opponents, which meant Leyline of Sanctity or other hexproof player effects shut it down and shut it off. With Ruin Crab, there's no avoiding the thrill of the mill for your opponent. Sadly, many of Modern Mill's other key cards, like Archive Trap, still can be nullified by Leylines. But come on! Now that you can pack up to 8 crabs in your deck, you can shoot for that wild turn 3 win. It's a risk, but come on, have a little fun and get some crabs for Modern. All right. Coming in at number 5 is the Colorshifted Doggo that uses one of the best mechanics in the entire game, Landfall. Going all in on the beatdown may not be as clever as some modern decks do, but this is a strategy that'll still put your opponents through hell as you hound them with endless aggro. Say hello to that hellhound of Arkham! Hellhound is a good doggo, a 0/1 for a single red with landfall that gives it +2/+2. This is, as I said, a color-shifted Step Lynx. Already a fan favorite and sometimes played card from back in the old Zoo days, putting Lynx into red may just be the color shift to get ahead. So, full confession, I do love those old Zoo builds and had one myself, and part of me just wants to wave this around as a new piece to maybe re-energize some of those old lists. Possibly pairing with cool card combos like Atarka's Command to get an extra land drop and bolt your opponents for 3. Hee. But the reality is that the true use of this card is in a linear beatdown build, utilizing the other 4 Step Lynxes and classic cards like Goblin Guide and, yeah, just a playset of Lightning Bolts. Heck, why not try for 8 Goblin Guides with the new Wayward Guide Beast and get creative with those land drops, saving him for second main, tapping out on the first main, then returning a land only to play it second and ensure a solid Searing Blaze. Boros Beatdown, anyone? Coming in at number 4 is the exact opposite of an all-in aggro strategy, a card that your opponents may find quite taxing, taking the already annoying qualities of established elegance and combining it together for all the more misery. It's the Archon of Ameria. Archon of Ameria is 2 of any color and a white for a flying Archon, which reads each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn, and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. This is like Eidolon of Rhetoric and Kinjali's Sunwing had some kind of baby that focused on non-basic lands instead, which is better. That's better than a Sunwing. Oh wow, does this hose most modern decks fetchland heavy strategies? The only issue is getting it out early, which you're not too likely to do in a Death and Taxes build, but what you are likely to accomplish there is slowing your opponents down with DNT classics like Chalice of the Void, Giver of Ruins, and Aethersworn Canonist, while the classic Aether Vial will help you get ahead and stay ahead. Not to mention, a 2/3 flyer in this build is nothing to sneeze at either, and I'm sure my friend Vince over at Pleasant Kenobi is super excited to play with this in his Death and Taxes decks. Hey, maybe we can all convince him to go make a YouTube channel so we can hear his thoughts on this in Modern. All right, it's time for number 3, and so I want to dig a little deeper into the good stuff from Zendikar Rising. But there's so many trap cards that look good on the surface, but won't really take root in the format. Which are the duds and which are the real deal? It's indeed a conundrum of conflict. Aha! Number 3 is indeed a confounding conundrum. How about a conundrum for your opponents who play Fetchlands, which in Modern is all of them? Conundrum's 1 and a blue for an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land they control to its owner's hand. Okay, so obviously my first thought is Fetchlands, Fetchlands, Fetchlands. This is some kind of hose for them. But if you think about it, they can probably play around it using them strategically. It's still really, really annoying. And what I love here more than anything is that it is one-sided, meaning your own fetches are unaffected, as this is only irritating to your opponents. In addition to Fetchland irritant, it also works as a great answer to a few prominent decks already in the format, namely Amulet Titan and Scapeshift. And I think that in addition to Primeval Titan cursing this enchantment, it is no friend to Euro piles either. Magnificent medicine for what has been ailing the format indeed. This might even be main deckable. I certainly am going to, but just for the sick rubbins. All right, we're down to the top 2 cards, and as always, it's a bit of a tie. Even as I'm recording this, honestly, soft script, I kind of maybe wanted to flip them. They're kind of polar opposites, doing neat things, and indeed opposite ends of the color pie. Number 1 is in black, number 2 is in white. A faintly apparition of the sky, it is Skyclave Apparition. Skyclave Apparition is a 2/2 core spirit for 1 of any color and double white. When Skyclave Apparition enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target non-land, non-token permanent you don't control with converted mana cost 4 or less. When Skyclave Apparition leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner creates an XX blue illusion creature token, where X is the converted mana cost of the exiled card. So obviously my first thought was Modern Spirits, a deck that has lost a little prominence lately, but is still a great pile of power, always waiting to come back from the grave. And this certainly has a nice home there. Whatever problem is facing you on the other side, a Tarmogoyf or a Death's Shadow, this essentially just turns it into a vanilla 1/1 or 2/2. And then only if they wasted removal on it. A tough thing to do when Spirits is also running Selfless Spirit and Drugskull Captains. But the more I thought about it and saw that this is in white, the more I kept coming back to those Death and Taxes builds that we mentioned earlier with Archon of Ameria. This is actually a much better 3-slot spot, especially when you might use it strategically with a card like Flicker Wisp for some ultra exile action. No matter how you look at this, or where you look to place this, a card that turns Euro into a 3/3 without issue is going to be really welcome into the Modern fold. Okay, so maybe I was not completely honest when I said that the number 1 slot went to a black card. Half of the card, or one side, shall we say, is black, while the other half is not black, or white, or blue, or green, or red, because it's a land. But it does go in black decks, and one deck in particular is going to love this card to death, without a shadow of a doubt. That card is the Flipping Great, Agadeem's Awakening / Agadeem the Undercrypt? Agadeem's Awakening or Agadeem the Undercrypt. The Awakening side is X and triple black for a sorcery that reads, return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost X or less. Or, bolt yourself and play the Undercrypt as a land. As the Undercrypt enters the battlefield, you may pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. And you can tap it for a black. So, Modern is a format with a lot of low mana heavy hitter cards. Tarmogoyf is only 2 CMC, as is Snapcaster Mage and Dark Confidant. So there's a nice resurrection effect here. But what if we go all the way down to 1 mana? And then also ask ourselves the question, what Modern deck could ever want to actually bolt itself? Oh yes, it's Death's Shadow. This is such a perfect slot into Jund Death's Shadow's Bruise. Choose to lower your life total when you need to and get an extra land, or spend only 4 mana to bring a Death's Shadow back, not to hand, but directly to the field. Death's Shadow was once the king of this format, to the point that players called for a possible ban. Now it's really dropped far off the map. This is a card that is perfectly slotted for that deck. It was like it was made for it, and though it isn't an unstoppable power charger for it, nor would we want it to be, I do feel very confident that this is one of the best new Modern cards to come out of Zendikar Rising, in that it is a sure-in to this deck, and it is going to make it mighty again. Now is the death hour, just before dawn. Wake, sleepers, and haunt the living. But now I want to hear from you. What cards from Zendikar Rising do you think are going to take root in the Modern format, and why? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, even in these difficult times, your local game store is still open for business and hopefully doing safe practices such as curbside drop-off or local shipping and delivery. Check on social media, call on the telephone, and see if they are indeed available for you to purchase your products at. If it is fair, if it is reasonable, and if you can do so, try and support those local game stores. You're supporting your Magic community. Looking for more Modern mastery? Then be sure to enroll by clicking here in 9 Wild Ways to Win in Modern.